Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Rafi Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's just added 2 inches of rise to his fastball. It's John Prokota!
You know, my wife told me I didn't even need to add 2 inches, but she was happy when I did.
Oh, buddy. We're recording this on a Sunday morning. I'm just having my coffee right now. John's out here throwing heaters. John, it's good to see you. How's married life?
Married life's going well. We're 2 married men now. We got married at relatively close to the same time, right? When did you get married?
I got legally married in February of 2022. And then we had our big family wedding in San Diego, May of 2023.
May of 2024 is when I'm doing mine.
Oh, nice.
So
okay, cool.
This next month.
I will ask you where you're doing it when we're not on microphone. I would love if we talked about your wedding and then people were showing up outside, wanting to rail you about the finer points of Michael King's sinker. But we're not going to do that. But we are going to talk about the 5 pitches which have defined April for the 2024 Padres. We're recording this on the morning of Sunday, April 28th. The Padres currently on a 3-game skid as we speak, putting up some kind of uninspiring performances against the Phillies thus far after a not so good Thursday in Colorado, a game which John was not at, but he was at the 2 wins in Colorado. So do we think that they won because John was there, or do we think that they lost because John wasn't there?
I'm good at inspiring the troops, man. 2-0 this year, 2-0 so far. I think I went 2-1 last year or something like that. I think we're 4-2 last year in Coors, so I've got it. I've got him on a turnaround.
I've got 1 win in Los Angeles, but 1 loss in San Diego. So time will tell as the season plays out. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about 5 pitches from 5 different pitchers, which have, it's kind of a good and bad sort of situation. And then we'll end with a fun one, perhaps one that some of our listeners can see coming, especially if they've listened to the show before. That
pitch is bubbling, I'll tell you.
It's bubbling. So we're going to go basically first and start with, I think what we can say is the best pitch. Purely from a run value standpoint, it's the best pitch. And that's Dylan Cease's slider, John.
It's arguably one of the best pitches in all of baseball. So, we talked about this a lot on the Dylan Cease podcast when we introduced him as a Padre. But the pitch is just so dang good. It's been crazy successful. He's thrown it in the zone 46.7% of the time, which is a lot for a breaking ball. What would you guess that Blake Snell's slider, what percentage of the time did Blake Snell's slider land in the zone last year?
And you said Cease throws 47.6.
46.7.
46.7 in the zone. Got it. Then I'm going to say Snell was 38.2.
Yeah, that would be a good guess for a not in the zone a lot breaking ball. But he actually threw it in the zone 28.4% of the time.
Do you have swinging numbers on that? Do you have swinging percentage numbers on that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
He based on his Plinko, he mostly threw it when he was ahead in the count. And obviously when he did throw it behind in the count or in a 0-0 pitch, he just tended to fall behind. It's part of the frustration of Blake Snell is you really wanted to see him get to those breaking balls, and his curveball only landed 26.8% of the time in the zone. So once he got to those breaking balls, they were almost never in the strike zone. You could just kind of spit on them, and that's why every count went to 3-2. But so getting back to Cease, that nasty slider, 46.7% of the time in the zone, and then overall it has a 46% whiff rate. But specifically on pitches in the zone, it still has a 37.7% whiff rate on pitches inside of the zone, which is the best of any slider in the league so far with at least 50 pitches. So the next closest is some dude named Jared Jones on the Pirates, I guess, with 33.3%, but he has fewer pitches. And I think that he's probably a reliever, but I don't know for sure because I don't know who that is. But so 4% more of the time on pitches inside of the zone than anybody else in baseball on a breaking ball, he's getting whiffs. So it's just like a ridiculous pitch. You can talk about the run value. It looks like you have the run value up, but it ends up equating to a pitch that he can throw in the zone. He can get whiffs no matter where he puts it, and he can also play with it off the plate because we've seen a lot of times that he's like planted into the dirt and folks are still swinging over it.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating when a pitch is so good that you can throw it in the zone and still say, okay, try and hit it. And basically, just to put some numbers on it, Dylan Cease has thrown his slider so far 192 times. He's used it 39.4% of his pitches, which is fascinating in terms of like, he's got a fastball, he's got a slider, and he's got a curveball. Those are the ones that he uses the most. Like, he kind of throws you called it a fake sweeper before we started recording. Why do you call it a fake sweeper? Just so that the listeners know.
Yeah, so I mean, a sweeper and a slider are related in that one tends to have more horizontal movement. But the difference between his like quote unquote sweeper and his slider are so different in terms of velocity and vertical movement that the sweeper more resembles a curveball with extra horizontal movement. And that's what he called it too. He said that he puts a grip on it such that it gets more horizontal movement, and he called it a curveball. It also doesn't look like anybody's sweeper that I've ever seen. Like, it has way too much vertical movement on it, like a curveball would, and it's so much slower than his slider. So it's more of a horizontal curveball than a sweeper, I would say. That being said, StatClass classifies it as a sweeper.
Okay. Well, now my brain is, I can't get off of this. So how would that pitch differ from like a slurve? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So then that is kind of like a slurve. I would say that. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I would say that is closer to a slurve. That being said, it's like the same velo as his knuckle curve. So yeah, I would call that, if anything, a slurve.
So see, this is the thing that irritates me. The branding on a slurve is so cool. Like, a slurve just sounds sick. Then instead of it being called like a fake sweeper or a sweeper or whatever, just be like, Cease is throwing a slurve now. I mean, that's gonna scare the shit out of hitters. Okay. Well, anyway, I got a little off track. I got so excited by this notion. So
I will say he's only thrown it 22 times. He's only thrown it to right-handed hitters, and he hasn't given up a hit yet. That being said, it has gotten hit pretty hard, but without actually a hit. So.
What has not gotten hit hard is the actual slider. Hitters have a 106 batting average against it, a 234 slug. That works out to a WOBA of 182, a whiff percentage of 46% on all pitches, all sliders, that is. And you might be thinking, okay, well, what are the expected numbers? This is just early season, small sample. Expected batting average, 126. Expected slug, 221. Expected WOBA, 186, right in line with his actual numbers. So I don't know, man, it's just a good pitch. Like, it's just good. Go ahead.
It's arguably better than last year too, because he's added over a mile per hour of velocity on it, and the same thing with his four-seam fastball. He's excited to be a Padre. He's throwing pitches hard. It's early in the season, so we'll see how that like holds up over the course of the season, but he's firing them, so they're getting the same movement in the zone with more velocity, same to more amount of movement. It's just a good pitch.
Well, I think that actually makes a pretty good transition to what I wanted to talk about next. So the next two pitches are both fastballs, and I'll get to who's throwing them in a second, but I wanted to talk very briefly about what makes a four-seam fastball good. There was a fantastic article that was written in Fangraph's community research section, which I highly recommend if you're ever looking for some more content, by a writer who just goes by Namiki. He's a Japanese writer, and mostly writing both in English and Japanese. For Fangraphs, he published an article a couple of years ago that basically is what I just said. What makes a good four-seamer good? And there's lots of very good in the weed details, basically stabilizing a bunch of variables, changing one at a time, and letting you know, like, okay, what if we just hold everything the same and change pitch's velocity? Hold everything the same and change the release point. Hold everything the same, change the vertical movement, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, the summary, which you'll see on screen now as you're watching this, which, by the way, we haven't even said. We're 10 minutes in. We're bad boys. But we hope you're watching this on YouTube. Because we really think that when it comes to pods above replacement, you get the full effect by watching and seeing the data. I'm a visual learner, so I think that that's very helpful. We'll also throw up some clips. So we've already shown you some clips, I'm sure, of Dylan Cease's slider, and you're about to see some more clips of some fastballs. But right now, what you're looking at is the summary of basically how to get more whiff on a fastball, and the bullet points are: throw it from a lower release point. Throw the ball to a higher course is how the writer puts it. Basically, you want to have some quote-unquote rise on it, vertical movement, but make it appear that the ball is sort of moving up. Again, we're putting that all in quotes. And finally, make the pitch as fast as possible, which is, kind of a no-duh. But we're going to be talking about two fastballs which have gone in complete opposite directions. As you can imagine, one of them is Robert Suarez's fastball, which has been a superlative fastball for the Padres this year so far. Famously threw it 69 times in a row. Nice. Without throwing in any sort of other pitches. And the other one we're going to be talking about is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and that's Joe Musgrove's four-seam fastball, which has been pretty much an unmitigated disaster this year. It is one of the worst pitches in baseball, and we're going to kind of dive into why that's the case. So just to kind of put some numbers on it, Robert Suarez, he's thrown his fastball 123 times. He's throwing it, like I mentioned, a lot, 75.5% of the time. And the numbers he's getting on it are, again, really, really in line with his expected numbers, and they're just great. Hitters are hitting 154 against it. That's expected is 155. Slugging 192. The expected is 225. And they have a WOBA of 209, which is right in line with the expected numbers of 218. Just to put that in perspective, Austin Hedges last year, a 209 WOBA. So basically, hitters are Austin Hedges this year across the board against Robert Suarez's fastball. Now, on the other side, we've got Joe Musgrove. Joe Musgrove's fastball has a run value just in the month of April of -8. Now, we talk about run value a lot on the show all the time, and if you recall, it's about between 9 or 10 runs to a win. That changes every year, but that's a good kind of estimation. So having a pitch that is worth -8 run value means that in just the month of April, Joe Musgrove's fastball has cost us basically almost a win, which is crazy. And to put some numbers on it, hitters are hitting 462, slugging 962, and they have a WOBA of 615 against his fastball. Barry Bonds in 2002 had his best offensive season. The highest ever WOBA was 544, and hitters have a 615 WOBA against Joe Musgrove's fastball. Now, he's getting a little unlucky. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to brag or anything, but those sound like numbers that I used to put up with Pablo Sanchez in backyard baseball. So.
Yeah, Fangraphs unfortunately doesn't have any numbers on the GOAT. So Joe Musgrove's getting a little bit unlucky, I have to say. His expected WOBA is 487, which is still better than anyone in baseball this year. So yeah, the no good, very bad fastball. And so with all of the kind of summary points about what makes a fastball valuable, I thought we could kind of just go through and break down and compare these two pitches. One of the things that I thought was very interesting and is very helpful for this conversation is that Robert Suarez and Joe Musgrove have the exact same release point on their fastball. They both release it 6.3 feet from the ground, and they're both quite consistent in their release point for their fastballs. So that kind of ticks off one of the boxes that we talked about in terms of, what makes a fastball good is variable release point. And so the next kind of thing to move down on the list is vertical movement. And this is where these pitches are anything but the same. If the release points are exactly the same, their vertical movement is anything but the same. So again, what makes a fastball good is you hear this word talk about rise. We have to reiterate, the fastball does not literally fight gravity. It's not like a wiffle ball. It doesn't literally go up. Pitchers are pitching from an elevated mound surface. It's going to have a downward angle to the plate. What makes a good fastball good is the idea that basically the backspin on it fights gravity so that it does not literally go up, but it appears it is going up to hitters. Now, fastballs that aren't quite as good, they're not going to have as good of spin. And that notion of like a really, really straight, laser fastball that is really easy to kind of predict its movement, that's what happens when you don't have a fastball that has a lot of rise, at least from the vertical standpoint. So league average in terms of the inches of drop on a fastball is 15. So remember, having less than 15 inches of drop is good. Having more than 15 inches of drop is bad. Robert Suarez on his fastball has 11 inches of vertical drop. He's 4 inches above average in terms of drop. So to hitters, like, that fastball looks like it's going to be coming in at a certain height, and it's actually 4 inches above that is how they have to, if you're adjusting on the average fastball. On the converse side, Joe Musgrove currently has 18 inches of drop, so 3 inches below average. I thought this would be interesting to put this in perspective. John, do you know what the diameter of a Major League Baseball bat is?
I'll go with 32 inches.
No, not the length. The length. The okay. Diameter, like, of the barrel. You know what I mean? If you're looking at it,
so let me see. Probably like 6 inches, something like that. Maybe a little bit less.
Less than that. It is 2 3/4 inches.
Way less than that.
On the actual diameter of the barrel. So 2 3/4 inches the diameter of an MLB bat. So if you're thinking Robert Suarez is throwing a regular fastball, and you think it's coming at a certain height, well, the bat's going to completely miss that because it's actually 4 inches higher than what the MLB average is. And so Joe Musgrove being 3.3 inches below average this year means that, well, John, because you put it a lot more succinctly than I did, why is it bad for a pitch to have below average rise? How does that affect kind of what a hitter's seeing in a fastball?
I mean, one of the main things, I will say that having below average ride on your fastball is bad, but the more below average it is, sometimes it'll then start to play again. It's like when you're telling a joke over and over again, and then it's funny, and then it's not funny, and then it becomes funny again. That's kind of the same thing with a fastball. It's like, if it's so different than you were expecting, like telling a joke a million times, then it's good again because you just weren't looking for that pitch. Like, so if your pitch is exactly average, it's the exact pitch that you expect to see per unit velocity, then, it's a batting average, or it's a batting cage fastball, and that's something you've seen a million times. If it has a little bit more ride on it, then you're swinging under it. If it has a little less ride on it, or like a lot less ride on it, then it's going below your bat and you're hitting into the ground. So either of them can be successful. Obviously, it is much more valuable to have ride because you're getting a lot more swings and misses versus maybe poor contact on a fastball at the top of the zone, because those can still go and play and then result in hits. But it is worse to be exactly average than it is to be worse than average in terms of ride on your fastball.
Can you say that again for the listeners?
it's worse to be exactly average, just because you're seeing that so many times, than it is to be worse than average in terms of ride on your fastball.
Yeah.
Depending on the pitcher and the exact pitch, but for overall, like the rule of thumb. Or actually, are we not supposed to say rule of thumb anymore? It doesn't have to do with like beating your wife or something. Whatever's the not bad term for rule of thumb, it is you don't want to be average on basically any pitch.
I just want to say you're crushing it so far this episode with your little interjections. So far, batting 1,000. So I bring that up, and John explains it much better than I, because a kind of a hot topic word over the last several years in baseball has been spin rate. And the idea, especially when the sticky stuff was happening, a couple of years ago, the idea that it was like adding spin rate to pitches, and, that was then making fastballs play up and, potentially causing hitters to just be in this horrible disadvantaged position. But spin rate itself, literally just the revolutions per minute, is not everything. And I'll tell you why. Robert Suarez has a lower spin rate on his fastball than Joe Musgrove does. Robert Suarez is at 2,458 RPMs on his fastball so far this year. Musgrove's at 2,584. What matters much more is both the velocity and the what we call active spin on it. So we'll get velocity out of the way because that's easy, and we'll talk about active spin in a second. Robert Suarez is at a career high in terms of fastball velocity. He's averaging 98.3 miles per hour on his fastball. He was already throwing fastballs hard previously in his career. He's throwing them even harder now. That's amazing. Joe Musgrove, on the other hand, is at a career low in terms of fastball velocity. He's at 92.3 miles per hour on his fastball, which he was averaging 93 last year. 2021, he was at 93.3. That was his career high. And so, we're talking about all the different factors that make a fastball good. Velocity, I mean, there's a 6 mile an hour per hour difference between the two of them. That's going to affect things a lot. It's also going to affect, their vertical movement as well. A fastball that's moving faster is going to be rising more. That's just how physics work. But let's talk about this notion of active spin, which I think is a really, really, really fascinating concept that could get super nerdy super fast. So we will try our best to do this. But basically, if you think about the way that a football moves, or a bullet for that instance, versus a tire, which was the much better analogy that John offered me before we started recording. A football moves in a spiral. The spiral stabilizes the path of a very weird shaped object, because football is a dumb sport, even dumber than baseball. But the spin doesn't actually contribute in terms of the vertical and horizontal movement of the football. It just kind of keeps the path stable. I bring up the bullet for the same reason. A bullet has spin that making it tries to go straight. A tire, on the other hand, its spin contributes 100% to its movement. It's tumbling over itself, and that's what's propelling the object forward. A baseball, ideally, especially when it comes to a fastball, is a lot more like a tire than it is like a football. You want the spin on the ball to be contributing to its movement. And so let's talk about Joe Musgrove and Robert Suarez in this context. Robert Suarez has 96% of active spin on his fastball. That means that 96% of the spin is contributing to the movement of the fastball. Now, we contrast that with Joe Musgrove. Joe Musgrove is at 67%. So that means that he's much less of his spin is actually contributing to that active movement. And that's going to affect why Robert Suarez's fastball is getting so much more rise than Joe Musgrove's. Even though Joe Musgrove's technically has a higher spin rate, it's not all efficiently moving towards one purpose, which is what Robert Suarez is doing at a much higher clip. John, where did I make a mistake? How did I fuck that up?
You didn't.
Okay, cool.
You didn't fuck it up. Sorry, I was doing something else, and I was like, everything sounds good. Everything sounds good.
No. I was like,
right.
this is. Is there anything you want to contribute to that before I just start looking at heat maps and just showing people what the results have been?
Yeah. So the only thing is that, for example, Statcast has the total movement of Suarez's fastball at 18.9 inches. So active spin, he's getting 96%, and that's contributing to 18.9 inches of movement. So that's important because there are obviously different planes of movement that you can have on a fastball.
Yeah. And then contrasting that with Musgrove's 14.3 total inches of movement. So obviously different planes, everything like that, but the fastball is moving 4 inches less than Robert Suarez's. So now let's look at just kind of where these guys are throwing it. So what I love about this comparison, by the way, I didn't get to say this, even though Joe Musgrove has only thrown his fastball 22.5% of the time compared to Suarez's 75.5% of the time, because Musgrove is the starter and he's thrown more pitches total, they've actually thrown it basically the same number of times, literally. Musgrove has thrown 135 fastballs and Suarez has thrown 123. So we can kind of, just kind of compare them beat by beat and take a look at them. And so right now you're looking at a heat map of Robert Suarez's fastball. And what you'll notice, he has a big old splotch heat map right middle up in the zone. And Joe Musgrove also has that too. Spoiler alert. I'll get to that in a second. But you can also see there are these little hot zones that Robert Suarez has. He has one right on the right edge, if you're in the batter's perspective, the right edge of the plate. He's throwing it like literally on the paint. Same thing goes for, he has a nice big splotch, basically high and tight, if you're a right-handed hitter looking from the plate, where he's just pounding fastballs in there. And so we can get a little, there's a detailed zone chart that I'm also going to have up there too, where he's thrown quite a bit right in the heart of the plate, but he's like really, really good at dotting these fastballs right at the top of the zone, right on the edge of the zone. Now, Joe Musgrove, on the other hand, if you look, he's got two big, meaty red splotches. He's got one right in the same spot that Robert Suarez has, kind of middle up in the zone. But his other meaty red spot is like middle in. And otherwise, everything else is just kind of this amalgamation of blue that's just kind of around otherwise. So the only places that Joe Musgrove is consistently throwing his fastball is right in the heart of the zone, essentially. And the results, which you'll see now in these kind of radial charts that I'm going to lay out below, is that the quality of contact is just night and day. Robert Suarez has given up 1 double, 3 singles, and otherwise every other contact has been an out. And if you look at Joe Musgrove's, we're looking at a barrel heat chart basically. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of running out of steam. I got so worked up about this whole thing when I was doing the research this morning, but I don't have a good answer about what next. You know what I mean? Joe Musgrove has expressed his frustration. We were theorizing a little bit before we were recording about is Joe Musgrove getting behind in the count and then he's having to throw his fastball and that's why people are jumping on it, but it's not really.
It can be both. Two things can be true. He is falling behind, and he's also his command of it is poor. His velocity is down a little bit. To be honest, the pitch shape isn't dramatically different than any other year. It's always been bad, but it's always gotten good results because it's part of a really deep repertoire that you never know when it's coming. So I do think that falling behind matters. I do think that him missing his spots matters. It's all contributing. I will put in just the little thing that I was saying before, which is he added a sweeper to his repertoire that looks like it could be a very good pitch over time. It's got good results so far in terms of everything that you would want. It has great spin rate, it has good movement, and he's throwing it in the zone much less often than he normally does with his pitches that he uses early in the count, like a fastball and a cutter. Him coming to San Diego, one of the main things that he did that changed his outlook was he added a cutter, which is he has high spin rate, so his cutter is, while not fantastic, performs better than his four-seam fastball. in terms of getting ahead in the count. But you got to be able to place pitches early in the count in the strike zone. And his new sweeper lands in the strike zone. I think it was like 46% or something around there, which is good for a breaking ball and okay for a sweeper, but not good in terms of just like a early in the count pitch. You want to get ahead in the count more than 44% of the time or whatever. And so while that pitch could be valuable, I think he expressed frustration with like how it's like throwing off his release points with other pitches, something like that. But either way, even if none of that is happening, he is throwing a pitch often early in the zone that rarely is a strike, and therefore he falls behind.
So yeah, that's kind of the rub on Robert Suarez versus Joe Musgrove's fastballs. One pretty good, one not so good. Both similar release points, but basically all of the other kind of tangibles of their pitches could not be more different. I do want to toss it over to you, John, to talk about a new Padres pitcher whose kind of signature pitch has become not so signature. What's going on with Michael King and his sinker?
Michael King's sinker, yuck. Hold on, one more thing on Joe Musgrove. Just looking into this active spin data, his breaking balls have so much active spin, contributes to so much movement. If you just look at his like pitch shapes, it's just like pure red on his breaking balls because it gets so much freaking movement. Which, I mean, he's got to get to them though, is the problem. And so like, he's struggling with command, he's struggling with getting ahead in the count, he's also struggling getting to those nasty breaking balls, and when he is getting to them, sometimes he's struggling with their command as well. So bad start for Joe Musgrove. You're a little bit maybe darker in terms of outlook going forward than I am. I do think he has struggled with it, and it's not like it's suddenly much worse than before, it's just that he's not commanding it as well. So, you know, hope that he starts commanding it better, and hopefully the results will follow. But Michael King, so I mean, before we even started the season, one of the main like wild cards was Michael King. We were like, oh, he could be the best starter by the end of the year. He could not translate into the bullpen or not translate into the rotation and hold up over the course of an entire year. And the initial results are a little bit concerning for him holding up, just because his sinker, which we're illustrating in this episode, is down nearly 2 miles an hour, 1.8 miles per hour from last year. And what that's doing is making it imminently more hittable. His stuff plus on that pitch have gone down from 109 last year, which is really good for a sinker. I mean, it allows you to throw that pitch into the zone and get ahead in the count. And it's 78 stuff plus this year, so it fell off like 30% in terms of quality of a pitch. So Michael King translating into the rotation and then suddenly losing a pitch that's very valuable for him in terms of getting ahead in the count and just getting weak contact is just such a bad outcome. So 2 miles an hour less, down to 92.2 miles per hour. It's getting more vertical break, but that's because it's slower. Slower pitches get more vertical break. It's getting very average horizontal break, which, like I said, average is bad. I'd rather have it get like weirdly poor horizontal movement or like a weird amount of reduction in vertical movement just because people aren't looking for it than it being like incredibly average. And the outcomes have been obviously very, very terrible. So far, the WOBA against it is 549. Expected WOBA is 513. So that's not really getting unlucky. And the whiff percentage on it is a whole 12.1%. So he's not getting swings and misses. And when he's getting contact, he's getting really hard contact. He's given up 4 bombs on it already. I am a little bit concerned. But there is 2 arguments. There is one, maybe he's trying to like not let it rip so he can last for longer in the game, versus maybe he's just gets tired quickly in the game. And I don't know which of those is the problem with his sinker so far. I would err on the side of just like letting him have it rip as hard as he can for as long as he can, and then taking him out in the 5th inning or 4th inning if that's all he can last, kind of like you would with like Blake Snell, whose stuff kind of falls off pretty quickly as well, then just have him throwing a bad pitch and getting smashed.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize one point for listeners. The point of throwing a sinker is not that it's a like a put away swing and miss pitch per se. It's about generating weak contact. So John mentioned that the sinker this year so far has a 12.1% whiff percentage. Michael King's sinker in 2023 when he was with the Yankees and was throwing a good sinker was 15.7%. So that's still on the spectrum of all pitches. I mean, his sweeper last year had a 39.5% whiff percentage. That's a big whiff percentage. Like that's a pitch that you're supposed to be using to generate swing and miss. And so the sinker this year being at a 12.1% whiff percentage is bad, but not wholly concerning. The point is to generate weak contact, like we said, and that's where the difference is. Last year, Michael King's sinker had an average exit velocity of 88.4 miles per hour. This year, it's up to 92.1. It's the pitch that's getting smoked the most out of his entire 5-pitch arsenal, and it's the entire purpose of a sinker is that it's supposed to be the pitch that gets smoked the least. And so that's kind of like where this is really affecting him. And compare it to 2022, for instance, where Michael King had a 48.7% ground ball rate. That was his highest ground ball rate when he was with the Yankees. This year, his ground ball rate is down to 41.2%. And so we're going to be looking, and I'm going to be paying attention specifically to the sinker going forward, because it's such a critical part of Michael King's arsenal. Like, he doesn't have like a super bad fastball, but it's not great either. You know what I mean? He has an expected WOBA of it of 400 this year so far, which on the spectrum of things is not good, but it's not like, I think that number is going to stabilize over time a little bit more. But if he doesn't have the sinker to throw to play his other pitches off of, he has a changeup that he loves to throw, and that changeup is made more effective by his sinker. And if he doesn't have the sinker, I don't know what happens to the changeup. It has all of these sort of downstream effects. Anything else on King before we move on to our wild card?
I will say that he's one of the pitchers in our rotation who is the most like pitch labby. Like you look at his pitch shapes over the course of years, and it's just like everything's either really blue or really red, meaning everything is not average. Things move different than you would expect. And this year it is just less so on basically every single pitch. So I do wonder whether, I'm sure that he's getting this data and he knows it. And I would like to see if things change over the course of the next few starts in any capacity, because he is going to struggle if he just continues to do the same thing, because the pitches aren't the same as they were last year to this point.
All right, John, I think it's that time. I think we've come to the final pitch in the show. We can hear the bubbles boiling. We can hear the trouble doubling, toiling. I don't know. I got lost in the analogy, and then I tried to do the Macbeth thing, and it didn't work. It's Matt Waldron, guys. We got to talk about the knuckleball, because it's really funny. This pitch has a run value of 0, meaning it's a completely neutral pitch. It's been basically average in terms of its expected and actual results, and yet, how can you not say that Matt Waldron's knuckleball isn't one of the 5 pitches that has defined the Padres' April? I mean, the team really surprised people by having Matt Waldron not only make the team right out of camp. I mean, he had a good spring, but it wasn't a given. But saying this guy's our 5th starter in a rotation that has Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, Michael King, and Dylan Cease, and being like, and also Matt Waldron's here, which is like a really like just fascinating thing. And honestly, he's been doing pretty good. Good. We're all talking on a relative scale of a 5th starter, but like, what is your impression of watching Matt Waldron been so far?
I'm excited. I at the beginning of the year, we've always been Waldron Cauldron, and there was like this weird change where we were the most excited about him to everybody being way more excited than us about him because they just immediately thought he was going to be a very good 5th starter, to now us being a little bit more excited, I think, than some other people, at least before this last Colorado start where people got excited about him again. But his knuckleball, there's a lot to like. So I was concerned that he would struggle after even 1 time through the order, and he's been very successful 2 times through the order. He struggled a 3rd time through the order. His Ks per 9 go down from about 9 per 9 to about 5.79 the 3rd time through. His FIP is 5.93 the 3rd time through, xFIP 4.92. But those first 2 times through, he's been very, very successful. The slash line against him in the first 2 times is 244, 311, 366. He's, like I said, about 9 Ks per 9. And he's throwing his knuckleball more, which is something that we really wanted to see. It's up from 26.7% to 35%, a little bit less than 10% more often. He's getting a 1.4 or a .147 batting average against so far. And exciting for me is that he's throwing it inside of the zone at a 47% rate, which is good for we've been talking about this. It's good for any kind of off-speed pitch or breaking ball. And he's landing it, you can see from the heat map, if we we're going to show that, landing it commonly low in the zone. There's not a lot of high knuckleballs, and that's the saying that we always say is, if it's high, let it fly. If it's low, let it go. Well, they have to let it go, and it's landing in the strike zone. So it's just it's a nasty pitch. It's way different. Like I said, we want pitches to be different than other pitches, and it's way different than anything else that you're likely to see. The spin rate on it is 208 so far, which is just very, very good. And then it plays up other pitches, which is exciting. Like his four-seam fastball, you'd be hard pressed to find a worse four-seam fastball. In terms of stuff plus, it's a 61, I think I said that it was, or 66. Let me see. Yeah, 61 in terms of stuff plus on his four-seam fastball. And it's getting results similar to like Yu Darvish's four-seam fastball last year. So it just shows you that like you can have this 91 mile an hour, like no movement fastball that you don't even command that well. Like the heat map is like over the middle of the plate, and still get like Yu Darvish like results. I will say there is a little bit of concern that he doesn't have any other good pitches, and that he does really rely on that knuckleball being successful and then playing off of it. Because if there are days that his knuckleball either isn't playing well that day, or if hitters happen to be adjusting to it, then he has a very low floor in terms of what could happen to him. That being said, from a fifth starter, if you can get, more than half of the starts, good quality starts, you're excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm finding really interesting, I'm going to throw up right now, Matt Waldron's pitch percentage by game. And so, you can look and see that his knuckleball, he's basically stabilized to throwing it about 35% of the time. And that's kind of consistent in games. The thing that has changed dramatically over the course of the season is that in his second outing, he was throwing his fastball basically just as much as his knuckleball. And then that had a huge adjustment period, and they went down. And now what he's starting to do is he's starting to throw the sweeper more. It's now, in his last outing, it was his second most used pitch. And we'll have to pay attention to it. The trouble about Waldron is that, like, he just doesn't throw that hard. And that's what, the knuckleball really is what allows him to be a major league pitcher. He wouldn't be a major league pitcher if he didn't have this pitch. And so, when we talk about, Dylan Cease's slider, for instance, like, what makes it good is not only that he gets such great movement off of it, but it's the fact that he's throwing his fastball 97, 98 miles an hour, and he's breaking off, 87, 88 mile an hour sliders that are moving a ton. And so, when Waldron throws his sweeper, his sweeper's moving at 78.3 miles per hour, which is not like horrid, but it's just like, when you're thinking about the rest of his arsenal, like, there's a chance that if he doesn't get a great hold of one and he cement mixes it, like, it's actually not just a bad slider or sweeper, it's a terrible one, because it's now not moving at that rate that it needs to be. So I'll be really curious to pay attention in his next few starts if he keeps this consistent and throws his sweeper more than his four-seamer. But I think personally that this is kind of the right combination of pitchers, because if he can lay off the four-seamer, he's throwing it 20.4% of the time. If he can keep that usage, it stays a somewhat effective pitch. I think if he starts laying it in there anymore, it's just going to get exposed and blown up, and people are going to be waiting on it. Like, because the great part about the knuckleball is that you can't really wait on it. Like, you can try, but what if it knuckles really well? You're not going to hit it. And it's and this is the thing about Waldron, that, like, whether or not it works out for him, like, whether or not he turns into, again, your Tim Wakefield, your R.A. Dickies, like your top 1% outcome of knuckleballers. It's just kind of a great storyline for the team this year. Like that we have, like, weirdly, he's the most appointment viewing for me, maybe besides Cease, of like any of our starters, because it's like, it's either going to be awesome or terrible. And it's like, those stakes are fascinating to me as a pure baseball fan. So I don't know. This pitch has absolutely defined April for me. Probably, honestly, I'd say more than any of the other ones we've talked about. Maybe Suarez's fastball, just because he had that like crazy streak. But like Matt Waldron has had some like ink written about him in like national media outlets, because everyone's like, oh my God, a knuckleballer. Like, I forgot that we can have those. I forgot people can do that. So I'm really, really excited that this guy's on our team. Do you believe, now that we've seen Matt Waldron as a fifth starter, we were kind of banging the drum of Matt Waldron, the opener. Now that you've seen him as a fifth starter, has your impression of him changed? Would you like to see them continue to run him out as a fifth starter, or are you still thinking opener is the best move?
I mean, for now, definitely keep going with what's working. Like, if he can go 2 times through, he can go 2 times through. If he's going to be like a 4.5 ERA type guy, then, and you have somebody that can beat him, say Burritos is a better pitcher, then you can move Waldron down on the rung to a 1 time through the order type pitcher and probably still have a lot of success. So he's somewhere in that swing man type category, I think, to me, where like, while he's successful as a fifth starter, run him out there. While he's not, he has a pitch that maybe could play up other pitches for other people. Either way, that's valuable. So right now I wouldn't move him until like Burritos like shoving or something like that. But, and also I want to say one more thing. And one thing that's fun for me to watch is what I would say is the strategy of the team against Waldron, where you'll see wildly different swing, like in-zone swing percentages against the knuckleball based on the team. So like, when we played the Dodgers on April 13th, they swung at 91% of all knuckleballs that were inside the zone. So they clearly they just wanted to swing at it. And then it's got as low as like 53% of all pitches. So there's the start before that, I forget who we played before that, but they did not necessarily want to swing at it. Maybe they wanted to hunt other pitches. They were swinging at 83.3% of his sinkers. So clearly they were hunting the sinker. And so it makes for this fun little, like, game theory thing where everybody's swinging at the pitch more or less. They're hunting either the knuckleball or specifically not hunting the knuckleball. And I find that to be fascinating as well.
Well, John, we've laughed.
Hold on, one more thing, actually.
Yeah.
No, one more thing. One more thing is that I forgot to bring up about Suarez is, I mean, he has that good fastball. Even the best fastballs in the game don't tend to have a huge whiff percentage. So he's thrown like almost exclusively fastballs, like you said before. And he's only gotten a 23.4% whiff rate because fastballs don't usually have high whiff rates. And that's led to him having a 7.71 Ks per 9, which has led to him having a 3.59 FIP, which is obviously much higher than its 0.77 ERA. But before everybody kind of gets nervous about that FIP and his Ks per 9, I would say that his changeup over the course of history has about a 40% whiff rate. So he can increase that whiff rate and then probably his K per 9 based on that. It's just that he hasn't had to. He's kind of, it seems like he was waiting until teams adjusted, and then now he has a pitch to adjust based on the adjustments. So I wouldn't be surprised if, while his ERA might increase a little bit, his FIP might actually go down just because he's throwing a pitch with more whiff. So he is not somebody I'm as concerned about as maybe some people who focus in on whip and or FIP and xERA, just because of the like what's under the hood of those numbers.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I'm feeling excited. The Padres have quite the meat grinder for the next month in their schedule. So I think we'll get to see these pitchers throw against top talent, and I think we'll have a really good idea of if the Padres are so lucky as to sneak into the playoffs this year, how they might fare against some of those teams. So, anything to add before we wrap this thingy up?
Hopefully, when you're hearing this, we did not just get swept by the Phillies, because that will hurt everybody involved, us, our viewership, you pour the hearts of these listeners who are like fans enough to listen into a deep dive about specific pitches. Just know, we'll rebound. We got this.
Well, for John Prakota, I'm Rafi Cantor. Thanks for listening again and watching, hopefully, to Pods Above Replacement. We'll be back sometime. Who knows? Life is chaos. But I can tell you that probably there will be another episode of Pods Above Replacement. And you'll know when that is soon enough. For John, I'm Rafi. See you next time.